He still supports giving driver's licenses and in-state tuition prices to illegal immigrants. He demurred. But then he stood by the policies, and he noted that a conservative state legislature and governor signed an in-state tuition bill in Florida just last year. Understand, this is in-state tuition for illegal aliens. People who are here illegally get benefits that American citizens do not. You understand how they're incentivizing this. You are not going to stop this with a border patrol when you incentivize it to this level. And that's the issue that I have when Marco Rubio talks about how he says, yeah, I understand. Let me pull this back on immigration. He says, I understand that when you got 10 or 12 million people in the country that haven't committed any crime other than violating our immigration law and trespassing and demanding entitlements, I understand that you can't do that. You got to get the border first. It's not about the border. It's about the enticements. It's about the entitlements. It's about Cloward and Piven taking down the country with entitlements. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Now, going back to CPAC, because I think it's very interesting to see the different players there. We talked about how Marco Rubio tried to walk back his position on illegal immigration, saying, I get it. We have to shut the border down before we can declare everybody that came here illegally as citizens and give them the right to vote and give them full access to the entitlement welfare state. Now, that's not the problem. And when you continually incentivize things, when you build up the entitlement welfare state, when you give illegal aliens greater entitlements than citizens who were born here, when you do that, you are incentivizing it. You will never shut it down at the border. What you will do is you will shut down the American economy. And that is by design. We had American sociologists, socialists, Cloward and Piven, who basically strategized about that. I remember, if you go back and you look at the Libertarian Party, they have a questionnaire to try to get you to stop thinking on just this left-right line. It's called the Nolan chart. It was developed by one of the founders of the Libertarian Party, Nolan. And what they do is they ask you 10 questions about personal freedom, 10 questions about essentially civil liberties questions, 10 that are economic and 10 that are civil liberties, if you want to put it in those areas. And then what you get is an area, a graph, a chart that you can put out. And what they do is they rotate that chart 45 degrees. So now you've got a line that runs left and right, but now you have a higher quadrant, liberty, and you have a lower quadrant, authoritarianism. It's very important to start thinking of things in the right way, to get that perspective, that broader perspective. Because, of course, you can look at Hitler and you can look at Stalin and you can say, well, one of them is they're extreme polar opposites of each other, except they acted exactly the same. They were statist authoritarians. They used a different idea in order to get into power, but they essentially, on this Nolan chart, wind up down near the bottom. Looks like a diamond. They're down at the very tip of that diamond. When I took that class, when I took the quiz on the 10 economic questions of freedom and the 10 civil liberties questions, I basically sided with liberty and everything except open borders. And I said at the time, you cannot have open borders if you're going to have an unrestricted entitlement state. Well, of course, I'd been beat to that. I didn't know about Cloward and Piven at the time, but Cloward and Piven had already worked that out, and they said, that's the way we do it. That's the way we destroy society so we can rebuild it into a socialist utopia. And that's precisely what's being done now. It's not about the border, Rubio and the rest of you. It is about the incentives. It's just like Washington. You will never be able to get campaign finance reform as long as Washington is a black hole of power drawing money and power into it. It is too much power in one place, and it's become, like I said, a black hole that's drawing everything in. No laws are going to stop it, and no border fence is going to stop immigration when you incentivize it the way that Obama and Jeb Bush and others want to incentivize it. Now, Jeb Bush also said he's not going to sign any tax pledges in 2016. Why would we believe him if he did? Remember, it was his father who said, read my lips, no new taxes. Nobody believed that he was not going to raise taxes. And, of course, he gave us, at the time when he became president, the biggest tax increase we had ever seen up to that point. And when he was asked about it, he mocked the reporters. He was out jogging. He mocked the reporters, and he said, read my hips. And he jogged off. That's the family tree this guy is from. The family tree that gave us George H.W. and George W. Why would we even consider him? This is a guy who is deliberately running to the authoritarian left of the pack so that he can be the only man standing. And, of course, he's getting all the money from these guys. Now, the person who came in second, Scott Walker, interesting that we had an advisor, Mark Salter, the top advisor for the 2008 presidential campaign of John McCain, said he didn't like Scott Walker. He said, I want to like him, but Scott Walker is kind of a dumb A, is what he said. Really? Coming from somebody who worked for John McCain? I mean, I don't know. I don't know Scott Walker, but I mean, that is, if he thinks somebody is much dumber than his boss, that's a pretty bad insult. Now, the person who won CPAC was Rand Paul. And listen to what he said. He was unabashedly on the side of individual liberty and rights. No compromises on it in the speech. He said, your rights are who you are and what you are. Your rights are in your DNA, and the government can quite frankly get over it. Let's run some more of what he said at CPAC, guys.
Will you, lovers of liberty, will you rise to the occasion?
This is Rand Paul.
When politicians accept censorship, when politicians accept imprisonment without trial, when politicians accept torture, even of the innocent, as necessary, then lovers of liberty must rise. We must rise and stand with our forefathers who stared down the king. We must rise as free men and women and reclaim our birthright. We must protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
There you go. That's what he said. Now, listen, I want to repeat what he said there. He said, when politicians accept torture, even of the innocent, as necessary, when politicians accept imprisonment without trial, that's precisely what is going on in Obama's Chicago. That's why our reporters are there. That's why they're going to be joining us in the next hour. It's already there. And guess where that all began? In Chicago, and where they make the excuse for this. Of course, they say, oh, this is nothing but a headquarters for storing material that we've confiscated in the war on drugs. It always goes back to the war on drugs. Even the war on terror goes back to the war on drugs, the tactics that they've used. It's just an enhancement of it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Sold out for weeks due to the difficult and extensive proprietary process behind its creation, the exclusive InfoWars Life Secret 12 formulation is now back in stock. This ultra-clean vitamin B12 nutraceutical has been carefully crafted and developed over the last 2 years and is based on cellular science of how your body actively absorbs essential nutrients. Most forms of vitamin B12 are highly processed and synthetic and could not be properly absorbed by the body. Secret 12 is a binary of nutramedical grade, bioavailable coenzyme forms of B12, methylcobalamin, the same kind used in B12 injections, and adenosylcobalamin, the most bioactive form that has been created with our proprietary process. Secret 12 is taken by mouth, right on the tongue, and then swallowed. No needles, no injections. Don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. Discover the secret.